Hey everyone, we just shot this fun class over on Facebook Live, but we've edited it here for you, and we solder a simple ring. We take round wire, shape it into a ring, make sure that seam is nice and flush, and solder it live.
She makes it look so easy. I think I'm going to be soldering rings today, and I know after you watch it, you're going to want to too.
Yeah, it's very, very fun. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to give us a thumbs up if you're digging this content, and maybe consider subscribing. Let's get into the video.
Check it out.
This is what we're going for right here. This is a ring where the gap is nice and closed. Can you see that?
Yeah,
well
you
enough?
can. You can.
You don't want to be able to see light through the gap. So you need to cut it really, really flush. So there's a variety of ways. I'm not going to get too into making the ring, shaping it. You can watch Aisha's class on stacked rings or stacking rings. It's something like that. But you can wrap this right around your mandrel to size it. I use the wrap and taps. There's a variety of things you can do. You can also, and probably should do if you're trying to be very, very accurate, you can do math. It involves pi. We talk about it in that class. We're not going to get into it. But I'm going to do the super easy way today, which is I'm just going to take my wrap and taps here, and I'm going to start to build on the medium, which I know is size 7-ish. And I'm just building a coil, a couple wraps around. If I wanted to make a bunch of rings, I could keep going. But I just want to have a couple wraps. The end of my wire was a little squirrely, so I'm going to cut around here because the coil is nice and tight there. So now you want to take a saw. Saw is best because it's just like you'll end up with two flush ends and there'll be very little gap, or a flush cutter. Our Fat Daddies are flush cutters, and you can cut with the tip. I wouldn't recommend cutting 14 gauge with Tronics or Lindstrom at the tip unless you have the really beefy ones, because it can dull or ruin your tip. So I'm going to first cut with the flush part of my cutters facing the ring. I'm going to cut as flat as possible. Right there. Okay. And now I'm going to flip the cutters so the flush part now faces this direction, and try my best to get a very flat cut.
Wow, that looks pretty darn good.
So I can tell that I cut it a little bit of an angle, but I did it on both ends.
Well, there you go. As
like
long as
I
it's on
meant
both
to
ends,
do
huh?
it. And I know the camera's a little dark. I put it dark on purpose for when we solder so you can see the flame and all that. But from here, there's going to be a lot of finagling, or what did I should call it, putsy work. To get the tension, I go back and forth like this so that it just snaps right in place to help close it. Again, I have lotion on my hands. But by crossing like that, you can hear maybe that little click right there. You may have to do that up and down as well. So this has a little bit of a gap on the bottom. I already have one prepped, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. But what I would do here, if that was the case, is I would open this like a jump ring and come in with the file and try to get it a little more flat. Okay. That'll also take off, if you didn't use a flush cutter, the little tiny burr that is left on the pinch. And then again, back and forth.
So if you didn't have the Fat Daddies and you used just a that you had, not even a fancy one, could you just file until everything was flush?
Yeah, you could. And it's not too bad. If you're doing it on a flat piece of wire, like a 5mm wide, it's really hard to get it flat. That's when I would take out the miter vise. But on a little wire like this, it's not that big a deal.
Okay.
The other thing, too, with rings, it doesn't have to be round now. It can be, like, a lot of times I'll make a ring and then flatten this so that instead of coming around like that, they're more like that. Because then you really get a good connection. Because after you solder it, it's basically going to be annealed, and you're going to put it on your ring mandrel anyway to shape it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that makes sense.
So this is a quick and easy one. So again, I would come in and I need to take a little bit off the bottom of this side. But by the magic of TV, we're going to now transfer over to this one and make it easy. This is a charcoal block. I could also be working on a kiln brick. I've got my cool cup here to throw it into. You can use any, glass cup or metal cup for this. And my Cooper nail is going to be my flux.
Is there any difference between working on the charcoal block versus the kiln brick?
The charcoal block reflects the heat up a little bit more, so you can get, like if you're working on a big piece that you really need to get hot, I kind of prefer the charcoal block. But our beginner kit comes with the kiln brick, and it works great. So I'm going to work with solder wire. We sell this by the pack. This one's hard, I know, because I put an H at the end of it.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, so I'm going to do hard. I could do medium. I could do soft on this because I'm only doing one solder joint. If I was then soldering the ring shut and then maybe soldering a solderable on, I would start with hard and then do the solderable with soft or medium, because that melting temperature is lower, so I can get that to flow without flowing my first solder. That makes sense? That's good, huh?
Yes, that was great.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to cut a little bit off, and I use my Fat Daddy. I cut a few in case I mess up and lose my solder. And those are probably a little bit bigger than we need, but again, I want you to be able to see the flow. Before I get it all set up to solder, I'm just going to apply some flux. On this side of the ring, I'll turn my torch off, and then I'll flip it over, get everything set up, flux it, and just keep going with the torch.
Okay.
Because you want to have flux on both sides. So I'm pulled back so you can see exactly where I'm coming in at the torch. I'm just heating the ring, spritz, heat, 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 spritz, spritz, and you'll see it forms like a little white. So not only is this going to help the solder flow, but it's also going to protect the metal so that when we pickle it, or we may not even have to pickle it if it didn't get too much fire scale.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. All right, so let me come in and make sure I don't lose focus here, Mel. Is it looking good?
Looks good.
Okay. So you can see my gap is right there. There's a variety of ways that you can do this. You can do it with solder paste. You can do it with solder sheet. You can be holding the ring in a third hand on top of the solder. I could pre-flow the solder and put it up there. I could pick solder it. So there's a lot of ways. Okay, so I want to get the solder right under that gap. Oh my gosh, I had too much coffee. My hands are shaking.
Oh no.
Can you see how the solder is right underneath the gap?
I do.
Actually, I don't want to call it a gap. I want to call it a seam.
A seam, I like that.
Okay, there we go. Perf. So because this is round wire, it really is sitting on top of it, which means the solder is touching the seam. And let's cross our fingers.
You never know what's going to happen on a live show, guys.
Woo-hoo! Get out the fire extinguisher. Okay, let me see if I can get even closer without losing focus.
It's pretty fantastic. Ooh la la.
Is that still good?
Yeah.
I'll just put my finger here because it helps focus.
It's really good.
Okay, awesome. Let's do it. Who's ready?
We're ready. Are
So
you guys
again,
ready?
I need flux this side, but I'm not going to stop after that. I'm just going to keep going.
And that piece of solder is really under the ring.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
I hope so. It's leaning right on it.
Leaning. We'll spray.
I look at it go through the colors. It looks kind of green. Okay. So now I'm ready. Just want to talk real quick. You see the tip of my flame? The tip of that blue cone is the hottest part, and I don't need to get it down there. In fact, I'm going to turn my flame down just a little bit. Let's not get crazy here. You don't want to melt it. And one of the key components to soldering is patience. So this is a little hard because I don't want to block the camera with the torch, so I'm actually going to turn it back up so I can come at an angle. You see that? So I'm just keeping the whole ring hot, slowly getting it up to temperature. And when it gets up to temperature, it's going to flow that solder. And in a perfect world, the solder will just go right up the seam, whoop, like that. So keep your eye on the seam. I'll try to keep the torch out of the way. Is it still in focus?
Yeah,
Make sure it's not focusing on the torch.
No, it's doing it.
Okay, it's getting pretty close. There it goes. Do you see that?
That was so exciting.
Just brush, brush, brush to spread it. So you can see our seam down here. This is clean enough that I may not need to pickle it, actually. We have the pickle pot ready, but the flux really, really protected it. So I'm just going to dry it off a bit. And will you hand me one of those Pro Polish pads right there?
Now, for people who don't know what pickle is, what is pickle?
So pickle, you can use either citric acid pickle, which is natural, or Sparex, and it cleans the metal after you have fire scale on it. So it takes those copper oxides off of the top. And I will show you, since we may not be pickling, this is something I soldered yesterday, and when it comes out of the pickle, it looks like this. So it's got like this white film on it. Do you see that? But it comes right off.
Oh, wow, it really does come right off.
Yeah. So it takes all the copper oxides off. Let's get back to focus here. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. Here we go. So let me see. I think... Well, actually, I do want to show you something because, yeah, see how it's kind of brown right there? That's some of the copper oxide. So I am going to go throw it in the pickle. I could also use, also the pickle isn't a pickle pot. It's in like a nice little tiny crock pot that keeps it warm. It works faster when it's warm. But I could also use Penny Bright. So here it is. This is the one that we just soldered. You can see a little bump right there. If you have too much solder, you can come in with polished wheels, silicone wheels, sandpaper. We have a whole class on polishing with power tools with Joe Silvera that tells you how to clean this up, because the goal here is not to be able to see the seam. And it's kind of a game that me and my family like to play, because I buy a lot of jewelry from Aisha. And Lucy's always like, let me see if I can find the seam. But we never can, because she's so good.
That's awesome.
So then just with a Pro Polish pad, you can see how it cleans right up. And then from here, I would put it on my ring mandrel and tap it down with a plastic mallet to make sure it's round and the size that I want. If I wanted to texture it, I could do it then. If I wanted to stamp it, I could do it then. But again, in the class, we talk about all the different factors to the recipe to get the exact size that you want. So you can you see that little like blurb right there? I would come in with some sandpaper and easily remove that. And then here, it looks like it didn't get all the way in that gap, which is fine.
It's really hard to tell though.
Yeah, I mean, I had the camera coming at a weird angle, so I knew this wouldn't be perfect. That's okay, but once I file all this back, it will hide it really, really well.
And technically, now, if you put it on your ring mandrel and then kind of hammered it, is it okay to hammer over that seam too? Like, I mean, is that strong enough?
That's a very good test of your seam.
And like, if you wanted a hammered look too, like that would probably kind of hide any type of...
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that, but keep in mind, anytime you do that, you're going to change the size of the ring.
Okay, and make it a little bit bigger probably.
Yeah, because if you hammer it, it's going to get flat, and then it's going to grow. Okay, you guys, we're going to sign off, but keep the questions coming and go make some rings. Join us in the group and show us what you make.